An 11-year-old boy vanished without a trace from his Colorado home. 2 months later, his body was discovered inside a suitcase beneath a bridge more than 2,000 kilometers away in Florida. The last person to see him alive was the woman entrusted with his care. So who was entrusted with that responsibility? If you want to follow the complete investigation and learn how authorities pieced together this heartbreaking case, please subscribe to our channel for more detailed coverage of this and other complex criminal cases. Gannon Jacob Stauch was a gentle boy who loved playing video games and building with Lego blocks. At just 11 years old, he lived with his father Albert Stauch and his stepmother Letitia Stauch in the Lawson Ranch neighborhood of Colorado Springs, Colorado. His biological parents had separated, and Gannon split his time between households, but in January 2020, he was residing primarily with his father and stepmother. Albert Stauch served in the National Guard, and his military duties often required him to be away from home. During these absences, Letitia assumed primary responsibility for caring for Gannon and his younger sister. To those who knew him, Gannon was a typical child who enjoyed school friends and the simple pleasures of childhood. No one could have imagined that the final days of January 2020 would mark the end of his young life. The morning of January 27, 2020 appeared ordinary in the quiet residential community of Lawson Ranch. Surveillance cameras from a neighbor's home captured footage that would later become critical evidence. The video showed Gannon walking to Letitia's truck and getting inside around 10:13 a.m. He appeared to be moving normally, wearing a blue jacket. The truck left the driveway with both Gannon and Letitia inside. Several hours later, at approximately 2:19 p.m., the same surveillance system recorded the truck returning to the residence. This time only Letitia exited the vehicle. Gannon was not visible in the footage. That evening, Letitia contacted the El Paso County Sheriff's Office to report that Gannon had not returned home. According to her initial statement, she claimed that Gannon had gone to a friend's house between 3:15 p.m. and 4:00 p.m. and had failed to come back. She told authorities she had been searching the neighborhood for him. This report triggered what would become a massive search operation involving hundreds of law enforcement personnel, volunteers, and community members. Search and rescue teams deployed helicopters, K-9 units, and ground crews to scour the area around the Stauch home and beyond. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children became involved, and Gannon's disappearance received national media attention. As the search intensified over the following days, investigators began examining the circumstances surrounding Gannon's disappearance more closely. Letitia gave multiple interviews to local news stations, appearing tearful and pleading for Gannon's safe return. However, her accounts of what happened on January 27th began to shift. Initially, she maintained that Gannon had left to visit a friend. Later, she suggested he might have been abducted. In subsequent statements, she introduced new elements to her narrative, including claims that a man had come to their home and that Gannon had been injured in an accident involving a candle which she said caused her to take him for a drive. These inconsistencies raised significant concerns among investigators. Law enforcement obtained a search warrant for the Stauch residence. What they discovered inside contradicted Letitia's claims that Gannon had simply walked away from home. Investigators found blood evidence in Gannon's bedroom, including on his bedding on the carpet and on the walls. The blood spatter patterns indicated that a violent assault had occurred within the room. Crime scene analysts documented extensive efforts to clean and conceal the blood, including evidence that carpet padding had been removed and replaced. Forensic testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Gannon. Additionally, investigators found Gannon's blood on a pair of Letitia's shoes. A firearm that would later be connected to the case was also examined, and Letitia's DNA was found on the weapon. Cell phone records and digital forensics became crucial components of the investigation. Data from Letitia's phone revealed that on January 27th, after the surveillance video showed her returning home without Gannon, her phone traveled to a rural area south of Colorado Springs. This location would later be identified as a site where investigators believed Letitia had disposed of evidence. Searches of this area recovered items belonging to Gannon, including his clothing. Furthermore, analysis of Letitia's online activity showed that she had conducted internet searches related to cleaning blood-hiding bodies and whether police could track her movements. While the search for Gannon continued publicly, investigators were building a criminal case. On March 2, 2020, Letitia was arrested in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where she had traveled in the weeks following Gannon's disappearance. She was charged with first-degree murder of a child under 12, child abuse, resulting in death, tampering with a deceased human body, and tampering with physical evidence. The arrest came before Gannon's body had been found, based on the substantial evidence gathered from the home digital records and witness statements. The most devastating discovery came on March 18, 2020. A construction worker in Pace, Florida, near Pensacola, found a suitcase under a bridge along Highway 90. Inside the suitcase was the body of a child. The remains were transported to the Florida Medical Examiner's Office, where dental records confirmed the identity as Gannon Jacob Stauch. The location of the discovery, more than 2,000 kilometers from Colorado Springs, raised immediate questions about how Gannon's body had traveled such a distance. Investigators traced Letitia's movements in the days following Gannon's disappearance. Rental car records, surveillance footage from gas stations and hotels, and cell phone data revealed that Letitia had driven from Colorado to Florida between late January and early February. On January 31, 2020, she rented a vehicle and began a multi-day journey that took her through Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and finally into Florida. Security cameras at various stops along this route captured images of Letitia and, in some instances, a large suitcase visible in her vehicle. On February 4, 2020, surveillance footage from near the Escambia Bay Bridge in Florida showed Letitia's rental car stopping on the bridge. She exited the vehicle, removed an object from the back, and appeared to throw it over the side. This location was approximately 25 kilometers from where Gannon's body would later be discovered. The autopsy conducted by the Florida Medical Examiner determined the cause and manner of Gannon's death. According to the official findings presented at trial, Gannon had suffered multiple sharp force injuries consistent with stab wounds. The medical examiner documented 18 such wounds on his body. Additionally, Gannon had sustained a gunshot wound to the head and blunt force trauma. The combination of these injuries indicated that he had been subjected to a prolonged and brutal attack. The condition of the remains and the circumstances of their discovery meant that establishing a precise time of death was challenging, but investigators concluded, based on all available evidence, that Gannon had died on or about January 27, 2020, the day he was last seen alive on the surveillance video. The legal proceedings against Letitia Stauch began with preliminary hearings in 2020 and extended over several years due to various motions, competency evaluations, and the complexity of the case. Letitia was held without bond at the El Paso County Jail in Colorado. Throughout the pre-trial period, her defense team raised the issue of her mental state. Letitia underwent multiple psychiatric evaluations to determine whether she was competent to stand trial and whether she met the legal criteria for an insanity defense. Experts evaluated her for various mental health conditions, and these evaluations became a central component of the defense strategy. The trial began in April 2023 in El Paso County District Court. The prosecution presented a comprehensive case built on physical evidence, digital forensics, witness testimony, and the timeline of events. Deputy district attorneys detailed the blood evidence found in Gannon's bedroom, the forensic analysis linking Letitia to the crime scene, and the extensive documentation of her journey to Florida. Surveillance footage, cell phone records, and rental car agreements were introduced to establish her movements. The neighbor's security camera video showing Gannon leaving with Letitia and only Letitia returning was particularly impactful. Law enforcement officers testified about the investigation. the search efforts and the discovery of Gannon's body. Medical examiners described the injuries Gannon sustained and the determination of cause of death. The defense strategy centered on Letatia's mental health. Her attorneys argued that she had experienced a dissociative episode or psychotic break at the time of Gannon's death, which meant she could not be held fully responsible for her actions under Colorado's insanity law. Mental health experts called by the defense testified about Letitia's psychological state and her reported history of trauma. However, the prosecution countered with evidence of Letitia's deliberate actions following the alleged crime, including the extensive cleanup efforts, the disposal of evidence, the cross-country trip to dispose of Gannon's body, and her calculated attempts to mislead investigators with changing stories. Prosecutors argued that these behaviors demonstrated consciousness of guilt and an awareness of wrongdoing inconsistent with legal insanity. Letitia chose to testify in her own defense, a decision that proved significant. During her testimony, which lasted several days, she provided an account that differed substantially from the evidence presented by the prosecution. She claimed that Gannon had been assaulted by another individual and that she had not been responsible for his death. She described a complicated narrative involving alleged intruders and attempts to protect Gannon. However, under cross-examination, prosecutors highlighted numerous inconsistencies between her testimony, her previous statements to police, and the physical evidence. Her demeanor on the stand and the content of her testimony were closely scrutinized by the jury. After weeks of testimony and evidence presentation, the case went to the jury. On May 8, 2023, after deliberating for approximately 7 hours over 2 days, the jury returned a verdict. They found Letitia Stauch guilty on all counts: first-degree murder of a child under 12 by a person in a position of trust, tampering with a deceased human body, and tampering with physical evidence. The jury rejected the insanity defense, concluding that Letitia was sane at the time she killed Gannon and understood the nature and wrongfulness of her actions. The sentencing phase followed the guilty verdict. Under Colorado law, the conviction for first-degree murder of a child under 12 carries a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On May 9, 2023, Judge Gregory Werner formally sentenced Letitia Stauch to life in prison without parole on the murder charge, plus additional consecutive years for the tampering charges. In addressing the court, Judge Werner acknowledged the devastating impact of the crime on Gannon's family and the community. Members of Gannon's family, including his mother, Landon Hyatt, and his father, Albert Stauch, delivered victim impact statements describing the profound loss of Gannon and the ongoing trauma caused by his murder and the manner in which his body was concealed and transported. Landon Hyatt, Gannon's biological mother, had been vocal throughout the investigation and trial, advocating for justice for her son. She described Gannon as a loving, joyful child whose life had been violently cut short by someone who should have protected him. The emotional testimony from family members highlighted not only their grief, but also their frustration with the trust that had been violated. Albert Stauch, who had been deployed when his son was killed, faced the unimaginable reality that the person he had trusted to care for his children had taken his son's life. The case raised broader questions about child safety, the responsibilities of caregivers, and the warning signs that might indicate a child is at risk. Investigators noted that there had been no prior reports to Child Protective Services regarding Letitia's treatment of Gannon, and those who knew the family had not observed obvious signs of abuse. This absence of clear indicators underscores the difficulty in detecting situations where children may be in danger within their own homes. Child advocacy organizations emphasized that abuse can occur in families that appear outwardly normal and stressed the importance of community awareness and education. The Gannon Stauch case also generated discussion about the prosecution of crimes against children and the application of legal standards regarding insanity defenses. Legal experts observed that while defendants may raise mental health issues, the legal threshold for an insanity defense is high. requiring proof that the defendant could not distinguish right from wrong at the time of the offense. The jury's rejection of this defense in Leticia's trial reflected their assessment that despite any mental health challenges she may have faced, she demonstrated an understanding of her actions through her efforts to conceal the crime and mislead investigators. As of late 2025, Leticia Stauch remains incarcerated in a Colorado correctional facility, serving her life sentence without the possibility of parole. She has no legal avenue for release. Gannon's family continues to honor his memory through various memorials and advocacy efforts. A foundation was established in Gannon's name to support child safety initiatives and to provide resources for families dealing with the loss of a child to violence. The murder of Gannon Stauch serves as a painful reminder that children are most vulnerable to harm from those closest to them. According to data from the U.S. Department of Justice and child welfare agencies, a significant proportion of child homicides are committed by parents, step-parents, or caregivers. This reality necessitates ongoing efforts to strengthen child protection systems, improve training for professionals who interact with children, and foster community environments where concerns about a child's welfare can be raised and addressed. The case also highlights the critical role of physical and digital evidence in modern criminal investigations and the dedication of law enforcement personnel who work tirelessly to seek justice for victims who cannot speak for themselves. This tragedy reminds us that safeguarding children requires collective vigilance and a commitment to the principle that every child deserves to grow up safe and protected. The legal system's response, holding Leticia Stauch accountable through a fair trial and delivering a sentence that ensures she will never harm another child, reflects society's obligation to defend the most vulnerable among us. Thank you for watching. We invite you to share your thoughts respectfully in the comments based on the facts of this case. Please subscribe to our channel to stay informed about this case and other investigations into serious crimes. Your engagement helps us continue bringing detailed, factual coverage of important criminal cases.